This episode of Shooting Performance TV is brought to you by Wilson Combat and Armscore Ammunition. Okay, so now you've shot the test, hopefully, and you have a measurable starting point. If you haven't shot the test because, maybe you're newer to your rifle or a little bit less experienced, that's okay. Then my recommendation is you go through some of the drills that I'm going to give you right now before you actually shoot it. So don't do something that's dangerous until you're confident that you can shoot the test. However, if you have shot the test, now you have a measurable score. And the goal now is to take the information I'm going to give you in these few drills. I'm going to give you some live fire and some dry fire drills and start working on these skills and then eventually retake the test sometime in the future, okay? So, number one dry fire drill and concept. Let's talk about controlling the rifle recoil. And of course, at this point in time, dry fire, I've got an unloaded rifle. And I want to start thinking about the best way to control the recoil of the rifle, okay? Now, a few things. When I originally started shooting, I was taught by my father and probably grandfather, and we did a lot of wing bird shooting, did some shotgun stuff, a lot of hunting rifle shooting. I didn't do anything that was comparable to the practical shooting and or defensive shooting that we do these days. And I started off with a very bladed off stance, something where the rifle stock, was way out on my shoulder, just a, traditional bladed off type position. But the problem with that is, the farther this stock travels to the outside of my body, the more the recoil of the rifle, which generally with most M4 AK automatic systems that are good defensive rifles, pushes straight to the rear, the more that recoil tends to turn my body, like a pedestal. So it starts to literally pivot my body. So I need to try to figure out how to prevent that from happening. To do that, what I want to consider is, the more centered this stock is on my body, the less of a chance it has to turn me. If you think about that, the more you would push, if you walked up to me and pushed on either shoulder, the farther out of my shoulder you pushed, the more likely you could turn my body. If you push in the center of my chest, though, you wouldn't be able to turn me at all. As a matter of fact, if I lean my body weight just slightly behind that pressure, you probably wouldn't be able to move me. So I want to mimic that same process, and if I can, I want to take the toe of the rifle, we're talking about the bottom of the stock, and I want to have it as centered as possible on my body. The second part of the equation is, when I place the toe of the stock on my body, I want to have it in a position where when I bring the rifle up, I'm generally speaking bringing the rifle up to my face versus in a position that's too low where I have to continually try to bring my face down to the rifle. So that's going to be a bad deal, okay? So center the stock, find your toe position, and to do that, simply take your rifle and then drive it right along your cheek and as centered as possible with a nice upright head position. And I'm going to say that's probably about where my toe of the rifle needs to be. And any time, I'm using my defensive rifle. For you in law enforcement, you military guys, those at home that have an AR at home, if I grab my rifle in the middle of the night, I'm going to immediately put that stock in the toe position. So if I saw someone out there in the living room, I could snap the rifle up into the shooting position very quickly. I don't have to, loosely carry it and then try to find the toe position or the stock position and then identify and react to a threat very quickly. So, centered, proper position. Now the second thing you want to think about is what your support hand does as well as what your strong hand does. When I'm shooting the rifle, my strong hand is always as high on the pistol grip as I could possibly get it. This is really, really important. And number two, this is probably the most important thing you can remember if you're shooting an AR or M4 type system, an old M16, whatever. I'm going to ride the thumb safety with my strong hand thumb. And I'm going to show you a close-up of this here in just a second. The reason for that is the safety is on right now. So anytime I bring the rifle up to my face, that process of riding the safety allows me to automatically wipe the safety off to fire my shots. And so when you have that strong hand in the proper position, we want to make sure that that strong hand thumb rides that safety. That's a key thing because every time we mount the rifle, we're going to be wiping that safety off. And that thumb, if it's not on top of the safety, we may miss that. We may not wipe the safety off, and we could pull the trigger all we want at that point in time, and the rifle won't go bang. And I have had student after student after student in classes show up to class and not listen to that key point. And on our first live fire drill, I see a bunch of guys and gals get up on the line and they go, and they're pulling like crazy on the trigger, but it's not going anywhere because they didn't wipe the safety off. So we've got to be in a position where that strong hand thumb rides that safety, okay? Now, support hand, where do we place it? A lot of people are riding with that support hand back here on the mag well. And if you take a look at all of the top 3 gunners in the nation right now, watch videos, Google 3 Gun Nation, or a 3-gun shooter, or Jerry Miculek, or whoever, guys that are at the very, very top of shooting, where accuracy and speed combined are the key to winning. And not a single one of them will be shooting with the hand back here on the mag well unless they're in a specific brace position where they need that position. Almost to a person, they're going to run that hand as far as they possibly can up on that hand guard, okay? And the reason for that is, if you think about that, the place that I need to control, or the leverage point that I need to control, is farther out on the rifle. The closer my hand is to the gun, the more leverage the weight of the muzzle has against me. So what I want to do is I want to increase my leverage against the muzzle itself, and the more leverage I have, the stabler I can keep the barrel, especially when I'm shooting fast and the gun is in full recoil. Okay, so strong hand nice and high, thumb rides to safety, support hand is going to go all the way up here. Now, if you have a short barrel, for example, on this particular gun with the suppressor, I would not want to ride my thumb or touch my finger to that suppressor because it gets very hot. So if you have an exposed barrel on your rifle, you're going to want to be careful you don't touch it. However, I'm going to ride my support hand as far forward as I possibly can. And on most of my defensive rifles, the 2 that I have at home right now, this one doesn't have one on it, I have a light system. So my thumb, whether or not I'm shooting on my left shoulder or my right shoulder, is always riding the pressure switch for my light. So I'm always activating that light. So in the middle of the night, if I had to use my flashlight, I could activate that light switch, okay? So first dry fire drill is very, very simple. I'm going to have you start with that good toe position, 45-degree low ready, and all we're going to do is practice mounting the rifle, wiping the safety off, building our cheek weld, finding that dot, and pressing the trigger. Once you're done, simulate that tap of the magazine, rack, safety back on, continue the mount process. A couple more tips for you. Number 1, my body weight needs to be aggressive and forward. You know, some great instructors out there label that as nose over toes. So when I look down, my nose needs to be over my toes. I don't want my nose over my arch of my foot, or even worse, over my heel. Okay, so nose somewhere forward of toes. Number 2, I'm keeping my pelvic girdle square to the target, which keeps my shoulders square to the target, which allows me to get my body weight behind the gun. And then last but not least, small tip for you, and you probably can't see this that well, is when I'm mounting the rifle, I'm always driving the elbow down and the shoulder forward. Driving the elbow down, the shoulder forward. And what that does is, that locks up my chest against the stock of the rifle. And number 2, if I were shooting around a piece of cover, for example, your living room wall or whatever else, every time I drop this elbow down and kind of invert it, it keeps it nice and low, so as I move down a hallway and or maybe some guy is in my house shooting back at me, then that elbow's not exposed and I'm not getting shot at, okay? So, once again, dry fire drill, here we go. Mount the rifle, safety off, drive the elbow down, shoulder forward. I probably need to be a little more aggressive in my stance. Snapping the rifle up there, firing my shot. And every time I'm doing this, I'm finding that dot on the center of the target, stabilizing it, and firing those shots. Here we go. And that's it. And there's your dry fire drill. So here in just a minute, after you work that dry fire drill a bunch of times, I'm going to have you go live fire. And for that, you're going to need a magazine with at least 30 rounds in it. And if you have a 30-round magazine, your rifle. And don't forget your eye and ear protection.